If we could all take our seats, we will begin this meeting. It being July 15th at 9 a.m., I'll call this meeting to order. This is the annual budget planning meeting for the County of Newell. We'll have Holly will be here, but just a little late this morning, so I think otherwise everyone's in their place. Dan is with us virtually. Is that right, Dan? There he is.
I think I am.
Okay, I think so. Good. Looks good. We have an agenda that's been circulated. Is there any changes to the agenda or a motion to approve the agenda as circulated and presented? Kelly? All in favor of approving the agenda, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. This being our annual budget planning meeting, I'm going to ask Matt to begin with item number 4.1, the planning presentation. He'll give us an overview of what we're looking at and some context for our discussion today. Go ahead, Matt.
Great. Good morning, Council. Thank you, Reeve Dirksen. Hopefully you're bored with most of my presentation today. I often feel like a broken record because I keep revisiting the same themes year over year, but I think that's a good thing. We really today are focused on, we tried to focus on high level, 30,000 foot view. So where are we at in terms of our process? July 7th, July 15th, I got a typo already on my slides. We're really looking for council direction for staff. We have a few big ideas. Some of this has fallen out of strategic planning ideas. Some of it is risks that we know we have in the community. So we pitch some of these big ideas, and before we do too much work on them, we want to make sure we're on the right track. If there's duds, we're looking for council to tell us the idea is a dud today so we don't spend too much time on it. And if we've missed some big ideas that you've got in your back pocket, we want to have those ideas surface today so we can take the next couple of months doing work on them. And when we come back in October, November, for review of the interim budget, you're seeing what you want to see for information. So that's where we're at in our timeline. What's the purpose? Again, opportunity for council to provide direction. We're looking at service level changes, setting priorities, identifying areas where additional information is needed to facilitate sustainable decisions. Confirming some of the assumptions we're going to use as administration for the numbers that you see coming at you in the interim budget, and considering what the county's capacity is to deliver these services and fund them. We always want to anchor back to the county's vision, mission, guiding principles. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but if you review these things and you look at the services that the county provides and the activities that council and administration are engaged in, I think we do an all right job delivering on our vision and mission and being anchored to those guiding principles. Sustainable county, growing county, a prosperous county, socially responsible, and a well-governed county. We want to be focused on strategic decision-making today. Pardon me. So why are we here? Well, we're here because we provide a ton of services in the community. Largely, we're a roads company. You know, over 50% of every tax dollar goes to managing, maintaining the road network. So we want to be sure we're reinvesting in our road network. Recreation, quality of life, fire and emergency services, addressing risks in the community. The only reason we are here is because there is activity and people in the county who rely on our services. Improvements in service levels. We continue to build out the rural water system. We have dreams of paving additional roads. That's on your agenda today. Support for our volunteer firefighters, and managing risks. Three things we can do when we identify a risk. We can accept it, we can insure against it, or we can invest in risk mitigation and prevention strategies. So you'll see some of that today. Budget pressures. Just like a household, the county faces budget pressures. The story the last couple of years has been supply chain issues. Those are starting to resolve themselves out. Inflation, I've got the headline inflation number there. I think for May, we're around 3% in Alberta. It would be nice to see that trend a little bit lower towards that 2%. We continue to receive funding requests from our service provider partners. You'll see some of that in front of you today. And service level enhancement. So you'll see we're proposing an increase in staff capacity by 0.34 full-time equivalent. You say, well, how do you get 0.34 of a person? Well, we're going to propose to remove a project assistant off of the budget. We've got somebody going on leave. We're doing a little shift between fire and corporate safety for the admin position. You'll remember in this year's budget, we're looking at adding an engineering technologist for Jeff and Mark's crew. They come in the last quarter of the year. They will be coming in for the full year budget next year, so that increases by 0.67 overall. And then Stuart's going to pitch a fire training officer compliance coordinator today, so that goes up by 1. So do the math, and it all shakes out to a net increase of 0.34. We try and keep things pretty tight on the staffing level. You could always bring more staff in and accomplish more, but we want to be responsible with our ratepayers' dollars and the rate at which we grow the staff contingent. So whenever we pitch a staffing position, I expect you to ask us about, can we get it done with contracted services? So that should be a question somebody puts to us today. Continuing on, let's get to that 30,000 foot view. So I put this in front of you, or try to put it in front of you each year. It's the county's net worth, our capacity to provide service. It's really a snapshot at the end of each year taken from county financial statements about our capacity. The red bar is the value left in your tangible capital assets. So that's your roads, water lines, sewer lines, this glorious building that we're meeting in. How much of that value is left to be amortized over the next number of years? The value of bridges. The green is financial assets. So cash on hand, cash and investments, your accounts receivable. You have an account receivable balance for local improvement taxes. That takes a long time to get back. You're going to have a receivable balance for your rural water project, money that the province owes you under what used to be the MSI and is now the local government fiscal framework. That's going to take a few years for the province to actually pony up those dollars. And then the purple is the liabilities, your debt. We had ramped up the per capita debt pretty quick when we borrowed for the rural water project. I think we should all celebrate because that first phase was paid off December 2023. So you've got a $50 million plus asset out there that's fully paid. That speaks to the capacity of the county in being able to build really awesome systems and get them paid for. We're not burdening the taxpayer with interest for 30 years. We took care of that pretty quick. We have a big brother. It's named the province. They keep an eye on us. They're looking at your finances on an annual basis up there in municipal affairs. I've put a couple of the indicators that they look at. So I said earlier, we're largely a roads company. We're also a water and a sewer company. We provide those infrastructure services. And the province expects we maintain and reinvest a certain amount annually. It's not a perfect metric, but these are two snapshots of the benchmarks that Alberta Municipal Affairs looks at. The investment in infrastructure and infrastructure age. On the investment in infrastructure, they expect we're investing at least the average of our amortization charge, the 5-year average, and we're around $8 million. So that's kind of a benchmark to keep in the back of your mind. Municipal Affairs is expecting we're investing $8 million a year back into capital, at least. You'll see we kind of drop right off the chart. We were investing heavily. We dropped right off the chart. We triggered a phone call from Municipal Affairs when we dipped below that 1 level. They said, "What's going on, Matt? Why aren't you guys investing in capital?" I said, "It's coming." And look at what we just did. So capital is lumpy. This will stand out to you in a few of the charts that follow. We like to even things out, but we don't like to replace things before they're due. This is where our restricted surplus policy comes into play. On the infrastructure age, you'll see you're at the top of the pack. The gray shaded area, there is the minimum and the maximum for like municipalities, so municipal districts. The county's in great shape in terms of its fixed assets. They're relatively new. This building, 10 years old, your rural water project, relatively new. You can expect that to decrease over time if you're not reinvesting in your infrastructure. Net book value of TCA to cost of TCA, 2023. So we ended 2023 with an overall average of 66% of your useful life remaining. This just gives you a little more granularity and lets us as an administration see the areas that we need to target. Last year's number for machinery and equipment, I think, was closer to 30%. You'll see that's improved to 50%, and that's because you bought a number of really nice new graders. So that metric has gone up. Roadways is an interesting one, and I think that can sometimes be misleading, that 51%. Those roads are really what I would consider a perpetual maintenance asset. Once that road is there, you don't need to come back and reinvest the same amount to build the road, borrow from the ditches and build that thing up. You're doing shoulder poles, you might be repairing soft spots. I think the province has some work to do with some financial accountants to figure out a better method of tracking the value of your roads. But we are working on getting a detailed plan for road reconstruction in front of you for the interim budget. All right, taking the long view, moving on. This slide is why you have reserves. So you'll notice all of those bars are different sizes representing different investment needs. We invest in our reserves year over year to keep the tax impact relatively steady. So we don't want to burden folks in 2025 with the massive increase that's required for reinvesting in capital. And then you don't want to drop taxes down in 2026 and then bump them back up in 2027. So this is one of the main reasons we sit on $127 million of restricted surplus, is to even out the tax impact to ratepayers. Taking the long view, we have an estimated capital spending of $171 million over the next 10 years. 78% of that is for the roadway system. So again, we are largely a roads company. That's where most of the money's going. New assets buried in that chart is about 10% of your total estimated spending. Of that, looking at about $18.3 million for new pavement, and that's Highway 1A. 2028, you'll do about 8.8 kilometers, and 2033, the next 13 kilometers there. Water services is in at 1.8 million. We'll need to update that for where we end this year. There's a fire hall in there for 1.7 million. That's to be built somewhere in the southwest quadrant. We're going to punt that. You're not going to build, we're not proposing you build that fire hall in 2025. The Bear report gave Stuart some good information that he needs to continue to chew through, so that one's going to be punted to an out year. Whenever you see a plan, you should ask what's missing. So we know Township Road 19-2 was just approved as a project. We'll get that one in here. So that's not in these numbers. That'll bump the figure up. And then there might be things that you choose need to shift, right? So looking at the pavement out 2028, maybe that's too soon, maybe it's too late, maybe it's not the right project. So this is the snapshot that we have right now that we're looking at. because we have the snapshot, we've got good information to make decisions if there's things we want to shift around. So taking this chart and breaking it down in a little more granular detail, since we're largely focused on roads, the next slide shows the breakdown between the different categories in your roadway system. So between new pavement, paving overlays, gravel road reconstruction, our partnership with the EID. We allocate $1 million annually to the EID drainage partnership. We're allocating $1.8 million a year to gravel road reconstruction. And then bridges. Bridges are, I think, really interesting. You've got 26 bridges to replace over the next 10 years there. They're on the books. Original cost, $1.7 million. The estimated cost to replace is $17.7 million. So that's a factor of 10 times. So we go back to the budget pressures and inflation. Cost of living is one of those pressures, but really the cost to replace equipment and infrastructure is very significant, right? So I know it's easy to look at our reserve balance and say, geez, $127 million seems like a lot of money for the county to be sitting on. But when you take the long view, you have an argument that it's likely not enough. And it's likely not enough, especially with the pressures that we're facing from reduced provincial grant funding. So let's talk about funding sources. We've got all of these things we need to replace, reinvest in. We've got these expectations from the province to reinvest. Show me the money. Where's the money coming from? User fees, grants, debt, restricted surplus, which is last year's taxes. It drives me nuts whenever I hear or see a headline from another municipality that says, well, we've got this project and we're funding it from reserves. We're not funding it from taxes. No tax impact. It's a little disingenuous because restricted surplus is last year's taxes. So anytime you see a peer municipality talking like that, call them out, because that's not true. Restricted surplus is last year's taxes. You have to be responsible with that as well. And then lastly, taxes, which funds about 78% of our budget each year. So let's talk about user fees. I'm not going to go through this entire slide. This is less than 10% of where the money comes from for the county. We're not proposing any changes to campground fees. We're going to make a little increase on the minibus. Utilities, again, plus minus 3%. When you're talking user fees, some people push back and say, well, you shouldn't be hitting me with user fees. I already pay taxes. Well, taxes are generally for public goods and services. Those services that are really hard to exclude people from using, like showing up to the park, driving down a road. We could do it. We could put tolls on every road, but that's expensive, not always reasonable. So taxes for your public services and goods, user fees for private. So if you come in, you rent a trap, a magpie trap, we know who's using it and nobody else can use it at the same time as you, so you pay $1 a day for the magpie trap. Yeah. And then mixed. There's some services that, I'd say dust abatement is one of these. You know, there's benefit to the person whose yard is adjacent to where the dust abatement is applied, and there's a public benefit from reducing dust in the air more broadly. So those, you have an argument to hit a user for a portion of the fee, and public funds the rest. Grants. So I've got a chart on the next slide here showing you what the trend has been on grant funding, if we can get the next slide up. We're facing a new reality. So MSI, you used to get around 3 million plus a year. We had a tight year where they reduced and then they bumped back up, but we're looking at around 1.7 million coming in for MSI, LGFF, now capital. So the province expects you to invest about $8 million a year on average, and they're willing to throw you 1.7 towards that, so about a third. That's disappointing. It means we're going to wait longer to settle that receivable on the rural water project, and we're going to be delayed on adding any significant grant-supported projects. The other big piece of funding comes from the Canada Community Building Fund. That's about $500,000 a year. That is funded by the feds. The province and the feds are negotiating that updated deal as we speak. And then there's always minor grants that come in and are a nice shot in the arm. Todd gets some funding for the ASB programs he runs. From time to time, Stuart will get support for fire training, and we appreciate all of those grants. But the new reality does look like, unless there's some pretty good lobbying from municipalities, that you're taking a haircut on the capital side of things. Moving on to debt, so you can borrow and build things. We're in relatively good shape at the county for your capacity. We typically are averse to borrowing unless it makes some sense to borrow at a low rate and let your investments work at a higher rate. So we'll always be looking for those opportunities. A few smaller balances on the ledger, which are supported by annual local improvement taxes. So the ratepayers who benefit from the wastewater system in Scandia are annually making the payment on that debt, and similarly for Rolling Hills, Tilly, and Headgates. You do have room to borrow up to 62 million. The province gets excited when you go beyond 75% of that limit. So 46 is where you can borrow before the province starts putting their eyes on you. Yeah, moving on. That's debt. So you do have capacity to borrow, but we're always a little nervous when we put future generations on the hook for things. Restricted surplus or savings. Last year's taxes. Last year's taxes. It just drives me nuts when people say we're funding something from restricted surplus and it doesn't impact your taxes. It absolutely impacts your taxes. You got about 128 million at the end of 2023. You look based on what we've got projected, a slow decline there. I'd prefer to see a slow increase there. So there might be a conversation we need to have about our savings rates. Or are there assets that don't need to be replaced at the end of their useful life? I was really happy when I was updating our 10-year capital plan for bridges. There were 2 bridges I couldn't find. Like, where'd they go? No, there were 3. So we used to have 149, we're down to 146. Thanks to the EID pipeline program, that's a significant reinvestment that came off the projection. So hopefully, that's a good news story moving forward, that there will be additional bridges that get removed, because bridges are expensive to replace. Stabilization fund, about 15% of your annual operating budget. You have a small balance left in the regional enhancement fund. 543,000, 273 of that is allocated to the city of Brooks, 34,000 for Div 6, 68, call it 69,000 for Div 9 and GEM, which leaves 167,000 available in that regional enhancement fund for whatever creative projects council wants to allocate that to with a regional benefit. So that's the piggy bank, restricted surplus. Let's move on to property taxes. Everybody loves building their community, and the way they do that largely is by volunteering and paying their property taxes. Taxes could always be lower, they could always be higher. We try and be relatively disciplined. We like to say at the county, you get above average service levels for below average tax rates. I tried to pull the comparison for 2023 tax rates, but the province hasn't released that data yet. So you'll see in a coming slide here our 2024 tax rate compared to 2022 data. When the province does release that, we'll update it. But the reality is we're in a very good position for where our tax rates are at. And it's all because we have a lot of assessment, and it's largely oil and gas, electric, linear. You'll see the 10-year trend there. We kind of dipped down, and we're slowly starting to build back up. that's a good news story. We need to encourage and attract development. When development comes in, there's more people at the party. They can help pay the bills. And the assessment growth we use to cover the inflationary pressures in our budget. And then if there's enough of it, we look at becoming more cost or more competitive on the tax rate side of things. We were able to take a little bit of a haircut off a few of our rates in 2024 and hope to be able to do the same as we attract growth. And we do have some growth on the horizon. So when we talk about the need to encourage growth, council has taken some actions to actually move that. We've got the non-residential municipal tax incentive bylaw. I just want to bring that back up as a story to be told. If you're coming to the county to develop, the county is willing to take a haircut on the non-residential growth for a period of 5 years. If you invest over $750,000, we'll give you a 50% exemption of the increase in municipal property taxes attributed to that growth. And if you're linear, for an investment of over $50 million, we'll guarantee that our non-residential tax rate will not exceed 9.25 mils. And we're currently below that. The province recently made an update to the MGA and opened the door for the same kind of concessions on residential municipal tax incentives. So if there is an appetite for that, that is something we could consider in a future committee of the whole meeting. Are there incentives we would like to provide for that development? Property taxes. County also has policies in place to encourage tax payments. So we really like it when taxpayers settle their tax bill by June 15th. That helps cash flow the operation. And council has generously been giving a discount for the last number of years. It's currently at 2.5%. Those are significant dollars when you look over the 5-6 years that it's been in place. Nearly $4.5 million that are in taxpayers' pockets versus, in the county's pockets that could have been invested in paving plans or whatever other priorities. So I do think this is an indication of fiscal discipline on the level of council and being willing to give people a break. Small business tax policy. So in terms of small business support, there's $632,000 that's been left in ratepayers' pockets to build their small businesses into large businesses. So over the period, that's over $5 million left in county ratepayers' pockets, which I think is a good news story. When we talk property tax policy, let's look at the trend over time. So this next slide shows where we've gone with each of our municipal tax rates. We have over time been raising that farmland tax rate. 2024, we finally arrived where farmland tax rate is equal to the non-residential tax rate. We've moved from 33% of the ag service budget being funded by farmland assessment in 2014 to now 2/3, 67% in 2024 at that tax rate. And then the other shift you'll see there is the small business tax rate. A small decline on residential, which is a good news story. We're not proposing any additional adjustments to the farmland tax rate in 2025. We'll see where things settle out moving forward. So if council would like to see an increase there, we'll take direction from you. But I think we're at the place where we had proposed to arrive, and let's see how that plays out over the next number of years. Holidays. Holidays are coming to an end. So this is also a good news story. I mean, it's a good news story that there was a holiday for the oil and gas industry and they actually invested. So the intended outcome from the provincial level, I think, has been achieved. This is the report we get on an annual basis from Municipal Affairs saying, here's the growth that you were not able to tax. 2025, you will be able to tax this growth. What does that mean in terms of the tax dollars that we forego in the last 3 years? Well, you're looking at cumulative $2 million that policy set by the province cost the county. Last year, 2024, tax holiday granted by the province, if we move to the next slide, it was about $1.2 million that was represented by that growth. In the 2024 final budget, we always do a forecast looking forward, and we had anticipated we'd be able to achieve at least 2.5% property tax revenue growth. That would have been equivalent to about $822,000. So this growth should take care of what we had forecasted, and it might provide some room to reduce your tax rates. We'll have that conversation in February, March, April of next year once the final numbers come in. That's just the oil and gas growth. We also know there's some other significant projects in the pipeline: the JBS expansion, Remedics, industrial waste. Tilly Solar is currently being built. That's a $40 million project. So it feels like you can be optimistic that there's some growth coming, which I think this is one of the rare occasions at budget planning I've been optimistic about real growth coming and numbers you can count on. The next three slides are that poor comparison of our 2024 tax rates in each category to the 2022 municipal district tax rates. Just there for your information. They'll be updated as that information is released. And then the final, or the second last slide there, just showing who pays for what in terms of the tax bill and where's the assessed value in the region, just for council's information. With that, I will hop off my soapbox. I'm open for questions or comments, or we can dive right into the budget presentations from staff.
Thanks for that presentation, Matt. I think that gives us good context, always a good reminder to us where the money comes from, where we spend it, and also the whole focus on the fact that everything we do basically comes back to a tax implication for our ratepayers. Appreciate that. Any questions? Greg, go ahead, please.
Thanks for the report, Matt. Just a question with respect to roads and recreation and pathways. Do they fit within the roads, or do they fit within the recreation side?
Yeah, good question. Pathways are in roads. Roads, streets, walks, lighting.
I think, is there other questions? Thanks for that one, Greg. I just have a comment that's an interesting one. I mean, we are seeing a reduction in provincial contribution to our bottom line, as you indicated, but I think there's an interesting thing, and we've also dealt with it to some extent in our strategic planning, recognizing that certainly irrigation in terms of agriculture is one of the focuses of this government, and the opportunity that we have in our region for that to expand and for that to also attract investment in value-added agriculture. There's, as we've said before, there's nothing else that probably would fit that bill as well as a significant increase in our irrigated acres. So, and we've talked about that. That's not a budget conversation exactly, but I think as we're discussing our budget, it's a strategic area that we've talked about that we want to help influence, finding ways to influence expanded irrigation within our county, which there is potential for, but some reasons why that isn't moving as fast as it might. So that's just a bit of an aside, but I think it provides us an opportunity to more than offset what the provincial government has reduced their investment in our region too. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to suggest that we carry on and move to corporate services, item number 5.1. Lane, welcome.
Good morning, Council. Want to start off the discussion here this morning with a request that has come forward from the Division 5 and 10 Recreation Board. So I'm just the messenger for the board. We have two members of council that are present who serve on that board. What the board is requesting is an increase in their annual allocation. And really the request that is before council is a result of that allocation having been set and remained at the same level for a number of years. And we're finding ourselves in a situation now where it's time to catch up with the impact of inflation over the years. So the request from the board is to increase the base allocation from $70,000 to $100,000 to meet the level of demand that is being placed on those funds for recreation facilities within Division 5 and 10. I don't know if the two members of council that are on the board want to speak to this issue, or if there's other questions that council has that you want to discuss at this time. We can certainly attempt to address any questions that you might have with this regard.
Thanks, Lane. There are questions, I'm sure. Holly, go ahead, please.
Just what facilities are there in Divisions 5 and 10 outside of groups? And there's Castles Hall and there's a Silver Sage, but are there other actual facilities?
The Lake Newell Resort Community Association is the other organization that has recreation facilities, and those are primarily the park facilities within the community. And that's the extent of it.
Thank you. Neil?
Yeah, 5 and 10 is hard to, like we allocated those funds. It's really a recreation zone of the two of them combined. Like Division 10, the one I'm in, has no facilities, but we use JBS Center, and all of our funds have actually gone to Division 5. So I think we should look at it. We definitely do need the money from the requests that are coming in, but I don't want ours to be any higher or lower than anybody else's. And I had mentioned to Matt about a per capita base to start with, because I think that's totally fair. I don't know where we go from there, but every community needs more money. 5 and 10 are just in line with everybody else, but as long as it goes out on a fair basis, I'm okay with it.
Okay. Thanks, Neil. There's a couple of questions, Kelly and Greg, but I just want to follow up on that a minute. Is there in fact a per capita relationship, or has that been calculated in terms of the division, the
No.
contribution per division? No.
Yeah, no, that's certainly not the case here, and we haven't had that approach applied across any of the divisions up to this point.
Right. And we've dealt with one-off circumstances around funding divisions for recreation regularly, right? Yeah. Okay, thanks. Kelly and then Greg.
My question is, of this present 70,000, so in 2024, how much of that 70,000 stayed in the county of Newell for recreation funding? And then I would assume the balance went into Brooks facilities. So that's my question.
Go ahead, Lane.
Actually, of the amount that has been allocated for the Division 5 and 10 Rec Board for the past few years, it's all remaining in, all being reinvested in facilities within the county. There isn't any of the amount from Division 5 and 10 that goes into the city. That is outside of the recreation funding for Division 5 and 10.
Okay, that's good information. Thanks, Lane. Greg, please.
Yeah, just for a little bit of clarity on the reason for the increase, it's more, it does have to do with inflationary, like Lane had mentioned, but also certain items that come up every year that we are approached by, specifically the Lake Newell Resort, and it has to do with the beach area. The Lake Newell Resort feels, the Hamlet Association feels that the beach area is public use. It's a public beach. So it's not so much used by so much the Lake Newell Resort people, but a lot of people coming from the outside areas to the beach. And the costs involved with that are, sand, because sand does wash away, and we do have to replace sand on that beach every once in a while, and we do haul a load in or two every year. plus washroom facilities. That would be porta potties. These things have increased in costs exponentially over the years. And then maintenance of the area, including the playground, the public playground that's there. In the past, those have been burdened by the Block 4, I believe, condo association fees. And now they've moved into those costs being put into the rec board funds request. And then, they equal about, with sprinkler heads and all those things for that area, the cost is, roughly around $30,000 each year. So the $30,000, that leaves the rec board with $40,000 to actually work with new projects, which these, the rec board funding is designed for new type of and upgrades to current facilities and enhancing the maybe new facilities. So rather than it being a budget line to be requested from Matt for putting it in a budget for porta potties and sand and expenses to go into the regular budget, we felt that it was why don't we just keep it as on the rec board, but ask for the increase of $30,000 onto our rec board funding, so that the $70,000 can be actually used for enhancing and new projects rather than ongoing maintenance that happens every year.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. I think you've got us, he can notify us if he has a question. Question was just whether Dan had a question or not. Dan, you'll notify us, I'm sure, if you want our attention.
You bet.
Okay, thank you.
I've been writing down some questions. I'll ask him in a second.
Okay, Neil?
Yeah, with Division 5 and 10 funding too, we've been topping up Silver Sage with a fair chunk of change for the last few years. Silver Sage is used as much by the county, probably more by the county, from all over the county. So just comment on that. It's not all going into Brooks or going anywhere else. It's going, the bulk of it's Silver Sage Lake Newell Resort.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Matt, you had a comment?
I think these are always interesting funding requests, and trying to sort out the actual formula that works everywhere is sometimes problematic. So what I would say on the per capita benchmark, I would say it's probably useful that administration and council look at establishing a per capita cap for the overall budget. And I say this because currently we allocate $500,000 of the tax rate to recreation. So wherever that growth goes, you're going to see growth in the rec budget line. That might mean too much money is being allocated towards rec. So maybe you say, well, we do a analysis of how much are like municipalities spending on rec, and maybe that number is $275 per capita. So we're going to cap our overall rec budget at $275 per capita because that sounds reasonable. I'm just throwing a number out. And then all of the asks that come, you have to fit within that constraint. Right now, it's relatively easy to consider another $30,000 going because you've got some room within that $500,000. You say, well, we've got the resources, it's quality of life, we'll throw it at it. Where I don't think per capita works is if you're going to look at carving the county up into pieces of a pie, the bodies don't live where the bodies get rec services. And I think one of the best examples is your Hutterite colonies. So they might come in and use library services, but they're probably not coming in and shooting hoops or playing soccer or swimming to the same extent as the community at large. So if you're going to divide the pie up on a per capita basis, Bassano area ends up getting a lot of extra per capita funding for bodies that actually aren't showing up using the services. What I would suggest, and especially for annual operating expenses that rec boards support funding year after year after year, why are we doing this to our people and to our rec boards? If there are services that the county's invested in, so if it's the sand, it's the silver sage, let's do the same thing we did with Rolling Hills Ag Society, Rosemary Ag Society, and give them 4 years. Let's enter the agreement and take that off everybody's plate. No volunteer wants to fill out the funding application year over year. So that is another approach that council could consider, is pulling from the rec boards those items that just get funded year after year with those organizations that are key organizations, Community Association, Silver Sage, and get an agreement. That way you're seeing some accountability back to council as a whole and visibility on what's being funded out in the community. I think there's a tendency for the money that goes to the rec boards to be not as visible in terms of what's happening in the broader community. My 2 bits.
Are you suggesting kind of response option 3 there? More where we review more of what's happening in recreation and to deal with this specifically today?
Yeah, like I'm not averse to administration bringing back another $30,000 in budget so you can see what that does to the overall picture. And if there's some of these details that need to get hammered out, where you say, well, the 30,000 goes straight to the community association, 10 goes to Silver Sage. And I don't know what those numbers have been historically off the top of my head, but that gives your volunteer organizations at least a 4-year runway where they know it's in place. Yeah. You could even have the inflation factor on, and it makes everybody's life easier.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Neil and then Holly.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if a review of like our recreation areas and our divisions don't really make a whole lot of sense. You've got 5 and 10, which is basically one recreation area. You've got Holly's division, it's got 4 community halls in it. That's not totally fair to 3, whatever. I mean, how all these people come together and where they go and what they do might be worth having a look at. Maybe not.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Matt, you had a comment to that, and then Holly.
I would just say having that conversation is best driven by the grassroots. Administration, and I think council, is always happy to entertain that. There was some apprehension as the county went through the electoral boundary redrawing that would impact fire areas and rec areas, which we said, no, the electoral rec is rec. I don't think we've heard from the rec boards proper that they're having any trouble dividing the money up between the user groups who come to the specific rec board. So I don't know that it's time to have that conversation.
Okay, that's a good comment. Appreciate that, Matt. Holly?
For Division 5 and 10, keep in mind, Neil, that you always say lots of the money goes to the city for 5 and 10. So 5 and 10 is getting lots of rec money in a different way, because Scandia and my area doesn't access the things in Brooks as 5 and 10 do. It's just you can't really compare them. We have 3 distinct communities out there, and they like being 3 distinct communities. I think we have to respect where people are at. I do like the idea of the Silver Sage, since they are an ag society, having a unique agreement, and that would work really well. I'm just cognizant of how much administration time does it take to administer all these agreements, as opposed to letting volunteer rec boards figure it out. So there's administrative cost as well, that I don't want to increase our administrative costs in this. I'm not opposed to an increase. I'm not sure that's the right amount, because yes, things go up. Everyone comes in, we say yes, yes, yes. Then we're losing our ability to fund larger projects as well. So there's so many factors to consider. But I would like to see Silver Sage with a unique agreement. I do agree that is utilized by the entire county. That one would be valuable.
I see that hand. Okay, thanks. Dan, go ahead, please. Thank you, Holly.
Let's see. I'm not opposed to an increase either, but I was writing down what gets funded there. Sounds like a beach, Castles Hall, some green area maintenance, and Silver Sage for 100,000. But Rolling Hills is funding a golf course, a hall, arena, a campground, senior center, and a ball diamond for 120. So yeah, I'm in agreement with Holly there. I think maybe the 100 is not the right number. The other thing that's kind of hit me a little weird was that the maintenance used to be paid for with with condo fees, and now they want the rec boards to pay for it. So that kind of doesn't sit real well. But yeah, the other one is I 100% agree with Matt. I think an agreement is the right way to do this, not a per capita or nothing like that. It might be a little bit more of an administrative drain, but that's the best way to do it.
Okay, thank you. So not just a comment, you don't really have a specific question, correct, Dan? Just a comment on perspective. Appreciate it. Thank you. Greg.
Yeah, Dan, just talk about what you had mentioned. Remember that the beach and the playgrounds and sport courts and all that lie on MR County land and EID land. They're not part of the condo association responsibility. So the condo associations in the past, because they were funding those in the past, doesn't mean that it was fair that they were doing that, because it really had nothing to do with the condo association. So they are part of the public land and public responsibility. So, and that's why the request has come in over the past 3-4 years. They hadn't been requesting they haven't even put requests into this 5 and 10 rec money. I don't even if they didn't know that it was available to them. They now know that it's available to them. They are now asking for the money for these public type of rec type costs. So that's why, we've been, rather than the money going just to Castles and to the Silver Sage, now there's a piece of pie that Lake Newell Resort didn't even realize that this money was available to them. So now they do know that, and now they're putting requests in over the past 3-4 years. And I think Neil can talk to that too.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, possibly the word per capita is the wrong word. But what Dan just brought up there, like there's quite a list of services in Rolling Hills. They're getting 120,000. We've asked for 100. Those numbers are all just made up. Who knows what Bazan was going to ask for, Rosemary, Duchess. There's no pattern behind them. It's just whatever number comes to your mind. You come in here and we pay 25%, or that's not really totally a fair system, because it isn't fair. Dan just listed half a dozen things, and out of Greg's there's a beach and a little bit of other stuff, and Silver Sage. Should they get the same amount of money? Do they serve the same amount of people? That's a question that like I say, I think per capita was the wrong one. I don't want to go $100 a head around the district, because that would destroy certain areas. But there's got to be a little bit more consistency in how we dish this money out, even if it's more money, as long as it's almost the same.
Okay, thanks, Neil. We've got Kelly and then Dan, and we need to move along. We don't have to make a full-out decision on this today unless we're pulling this right off the table, and I don't hear that. We might want a different perspective on it to reconsider again. But Kelly, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to make a kind of an overarching comment. Whenever I look at funding applications, I look at what skin is coming into the game. So we're not even talking about what is being put in by the associations or by the rec board applicants. That, to me, would speak volumes as well. I want to know what they're bringing to the table, to the game.
Okay, thank you. That hasn't been considered today at all at this point. Dan.
To respond to Neil's comment, that's what's really nice about an agreement, is because for Rolling Hills, it's not a made-up number. That's the number it costs. That's actually slightly under, but that's the number that it costs to fund that place.
Okay, thank
Whereas
you.
the rest of them could be made-up numbers.
Okay, thank you. So to move forward, I think, like what I said before, we don't, unless we're pulling this off the table entirely, we can push this, or if there are specific questions or context that you'd like presented for future consideration of this, now's the time to raise that. Otherwise, we'll just move ahead, right? Matt? Any other comments? Lane, you've got... Okay, let's move on. Thank you. Thanks for that, Lane. Let's move on to item number 5.1.2, self-supply renewable energy systems. Go ahead, Lane, please.
So a little bit of history on this one. In early 2021, the council of the day had made a decision to move ahead with reallocating a municipal stimulus grant funding for a renewable energy project on the county land here that was going to supply the majority of the energy that this facility makes use of. That decision was then shelved later in the year because we were just going into the COVID lockdowns and prices were running out of control, and there was questions about supply chain dependence or dependability. But we're wanting to come back and have some further discussion with council about the possibility of looking once again at a project that would offset the energy that we're consuming in this facility. Things have certainly stabilized in the market when it comes to the cost of the equipment that these projects are based on. And we think that there's an opportunity for us to take a look at preparing a strong business case for moving ahead with the project once again. Doing the research takes time. There's certainly some effort involved. And before we spend a lot of time and effort in looking into that, we want to make sure that this is something that council would be open to considering if we come back with the details as part of the overall budget package for 2025.
Thanks for that, Lane, and I'll open it to council. What is our response to that? I think that's a reasonable question, whether we are open to it or not, whether before we go spend a lot of time working on it. Neil, please.
I think it's pretty much an excellent suggestion. I've got it on my shop. There's an 8-year payout. It's all working exactly the way it's supposed to. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do something like that.
Okay, thank you. This is not a decision with regard to anything other than pursuing or reviewing, getting the information to make a business decision based on. So, Holly?
I guess some of the questions I think we need to look at would be, I'm taking the payback numbers are based on the high export rate, which is what the numbers are at the moment. The government only guarantees those export rates into sometime in the 2030s. I don't remember the number that I was given. If our payback time does not fall before those years are up, the payback won't work. Having had a system that ran on the regulated rate, and then on the export rate, regulated rate doesn't actually have the payback on it. So it's important to know. I'd also like to know why there are abandoned big systems in Arizona. No one can give me an idea why that is, because I think our ratepayers would want to know long-term what this will be. And so once the regulator's rate is done, we won't have that money. So is it really worth it? So that if we were going to look at it, those would be my questions to get answered.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think that's a negative. I mean, that you're not opposed to getting the information. Excuse. So is there anyone concerned with us going ahead with collecting more information and being presented a business case for this proposal? Sounds like that's a go. Wayne, thank you. Item number 5.1.3, which is the full-time equivalents for a regional fire training officer and a compliance coordinator. Lane and Stuart, right? Go ahead, please.
So we're coming forward to council to discuss some of the recommendations that were contained in the recently completed emergency service needs assessment for our emergency services function. A number of recommendations were in there. There were 40 of them altogether. 3 of them applied directly to staffing and filling needs that we have within that function to take some of the pressure off of a very small team that we have in there right now. What we're requesting of council is consideration to creating 1 additional full-time position for 2025 that would be focused primarily on compliance and training. In the report itself, there was another recommendation for a full-time deputy position. Of the 2 that were identified, we're wanting to move forward in 2025 with the training and compliance position. We feel that would provide a fair bit of support for Stuart's position, take a lot of the workload off of his table or his desk, and allow him to focus on other areas where a lot of extra time is being put in. The training and compliance would provide direct benefit for each of the fire departments as well. One of the things that the local fire departments continue to struggle with is having meaningful training exercises. They should be taking place on a monthly basis. It would be ideal if there was a program in place that basically set up a framework for those training exercises, and the departments would then simply have to come in, run the program that has been prepared for them. Additional support coming in for the training sessions within the departments would also make it easier for the leadership of those departments to make sure that their staff, the volunteers in each of those departments are being brought up to the level that they should be performing at before they're in a position to go out and respond to incidents that when the requests come in. So this is really the information that we're wanting to share with council here this morning, have a discussion about whether there is support for moving ahead with this initial position for the 2025 budget year.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions? Lynette, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because it says I do not have license. Do we not have some staffing room now that we have quit with the city in our safety department? Is there not some room to move some of that around a little bit rather than it being an absolute full-time?
I'd have to ask Stuart and Lane what the qualifications are for compliance coordinator. I'm assuming this is safety codes compliance.
Yeah, so on the safety codes end of things, there's 2 different levels that you need to be safety codes basic or level 1 or level 2. So I guess three different levels. So within that, there are like multiple courses that need to be taken to attain those 3 levels. I'm going to say well over 30 on those 3 levels. So it definitely would be a whole lot of new certification for someone to do something like that.
Okay, thank you, Kelly, and then Neil.
I'd like to speak in favor of this. We have increased, with our new agreement with Pisano, we've increased responsibilities and workload onto the department and to the county in general. And I think if the You know, if the future trend is in that direction, then that's going to increase workload as well. We're also mitigating risk. The better we train our volunteers, we're mitigating our risk level as well. So that hits my L word. All right.
Okay,
Thank
thanks. Neil and then Ellen.
Yeah, two questions. One, how many people are we talking about training? And the second part is, if it's not that many, could we partner with the town? Like surely they need training too, instead of wasting all this money on all of our own department.
Within this, in particular, the compliance, and even the training, you have to be, sorry, I'm not talking loud enough, I'll get a little closer here. With the training portion of it, there is definitely some training that needs to be done with that and certification to be able to teach 1040 or the 1001 basics and the different courses. So there is some learning with that, as well as the safety codes. And with the City of Brooks, Barry and Kevin hold those certificates. Currently, the three of us are the ones that hold all those certificates for training and for code compliance within the County of Newell. With the City of Brooks, and I know this from before I left because I was their code compliance person for the majority of it, the City of Brooks has well over 120 inspections that they have to perform in a year within the City of Brooks. Within the County of Newell, we're getting close to about 100 inspections within all the different hamlets and municipalities within the County of Newell. So that there's a lot of hour draw there. My calculations here is it's a 660-hour position just for code compliance within the County of Newell. So for the City of Brooks to share something like that, I think would be difficult and would involve a shared position of some sort at a cost. So,
Thanks. Ellen, please.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the training required. Now, I like to remind everyone that we have a volunteer fire service in this county, and although it is wonderful, the training provided if it is required, but I did speak to some firemen, and they like to remind council that they are volunteers and to have more training and more training. They have full-time jobs to take care of as well during the day. And I hear some rumblings that if that much more training is coming their way, they might consider not being on the department.
Go ahead, Lane, and I've got a comment relative to that as well.
And that, Councillor Unruh has certainly raised a valid point that these are volunteers. They have their own lives that they need to be committed to, and it's a community service that they are providing. One of the things that came out during the review that was conducted was that there are standards that the province has in place that departments are expected to meet. And if municipalities are providing a service and not meeting the standard, there's a risk there that needs to be addressed. Somehow we have to find a way of balancing against the lives and demands that the volunteer firefighters have and the requirements that have been put in place, the standards that we need to meet when we provide this service. There's really two different kinds of training that we're talking about. The individual firefighter should receive classroom instruction that enables them to perform the job as a firefighter. It's the 10001. There's different numbers involved for different levels of training, but that is classroom instruction time. The other one that we're talking about is the practice nights, the training that takes place for all of the volunteers, practice nights that they hold within the department where they come out and they go through a simulated exercise, whether it's extracting someone from a vehicle or putting out fires in the training ground that they have. And this is the kind of training that we want to have in place so that the fire chief and the deputy fire chief in each of those departments has a program in place that makes it easier for them to organize the monthly training nights that their volunteers come out and participate in. We realize that these are volunteers. There's no question about it. They are providing a much valued and needed service for the community. But we need to make sure that they have the training that they need so that they're not going to be putting themselves in harm's way when they're out there serving the community. And this position is one thing that will help us meet that need. The other thing that the position is going to be doing is focusing on inspections for institutional facilities. And again, we have requirements to make sure that those inspections are taking place in our safety codes agreement, and we're falling short in that regard as well. And it's all a matter of how much time those things are taking and how much time is available given the current resources, staff resources that we have right now.
Okay, thanks. I would take you a minute, Greg. I just want to kind of echo the comments that Ellen made with regard to let's really focus on what brings best service to our volunteer fire brigade, because that's what we count on, right? Absolutely, we count on that. None of us, I think, want to compromise the safety and the training that they need to get. I guess one of my questions would be, how close to the edge are we on that? Like, I think we have a pretty well-equipped group of firefighters. I'm not the one to judge that, but hearing from them, they appreciate the training they get, but it also isn't necessarily monthly training. I mean, a large percentage, I expect, of our volunteer rural firefighters make their living during the frost-free days. Some of their living during the frost-free days, and you're not going to get them to provide the same amount of volunteer time that isn't emergent during the summer months. So I guess the question I would have, could we not cover this through contract services, which would provide us the opportunity both for compliance and training to bring people in who maybe regularly get a broader perspective because they're not just within our jurisdiction and provide the same service. Is that an option for us here that might be reasonable, and what would it cost relative to having somebody full-time or an FTE equivalent?
Having the service provided on a contracted basis is certainly one of those things that was identified in the report that is before council. There's an opportunity to really contract out the inspection process for the public and institutional facilities, and to also contract a training program provider as well. I guess it's a question of whether or not you're going to have additional benefits come to the organization if we go with a contracted service versus a full-time position. If it's council's interest in going the contracted service route, we could certainly come back with some additional information on that as well.
I think I'd like to see that. Pardon me?
See both.
Yeah, I'd like to see both comparatively, because and also what maybe the dynamic might be from the two of those, because certainly if you have someone who just, other than their own training, stays within our region, there's some limitations to that potentially, maybe, I don't know. But we have others, Greg, and then Adina, and then Lynette, please.
Yeah, my question was in regards to contracting these moths flying around. Anyway, contracting these services out, whether it's to the city of Brooks. I know they have, through Barry and Kevin, they do have two people that are doing, like you say, the 120 versus us doing the 100. Is it something we can share with them under contract? And the inspection side, can it be done through contractors? I definitely I'm all for, if the need is there, for having a staff member to do it. I think it's a really important a service that we need to provide our volunteer firefighters and our firefighters, whether they're volunteer or not. It's what's most cost effective. And I think that's our responsibility.
So I think you're asking for us to see both. So that's, I think, something we can legitimately ask you to come back with. Adina, please.
So, just a comment. I know when we get a needs assessment, it's always kind of like, this is the Cadillac view of what we'd like to have, but is there a Equinox? Do you know what I mean? Like, I know I'd like to live in a mansion, but I live in a very comfortable home. So I'm just wondering if, it'd be great to go all the way, but maybe, like you say, contracting it out. My question is, as far as time and time management, I know there's been paperwork not done and, or waiting, and if possibly more assistance to you might give you more time to get out and do some of those other things that are needed to be done.
Okay, thanks, Adina. Lynette, you had a...
Yeah, I guess you asking to see like the contracted or the full-time, I'd like to see what it possibly might look like as a blended one though too, right? That if like safety services, if there is a bit of capacity there for somebody to do parts of this, I don't know, but I would just like to hear that as well.
Okay, thanks, Lynette. Matt, you'd comment?
We have other plans for safety services, just to throw that out to, yeah, so I don't know that we'll have extra between what we're looking at safety to pick up on the HR side of things. We'd like to share with Stuart, but he's going to have to argue for either contracted services or an FTE.
Okay, thanks. Holly?
Yes, I'm also in favor of a contract as opposed to an FTE. Bazzano, I'm a little confused. Kelly, you said it takes more time. I understood that with signing the agreements with Bazzano, it actually free time up for Stuart. So I'm a little confused on that time piece. But I think the compliance, you're saying more than 6 hours on average to complete. You said 660 hours. How it can be that much? I'm just not understanding how compliance, if it's the paperwork or how it can take that much time. And then again, with required training for firefighters as opposed to what might be necessary. I know I heard from a different fire department, not in this county, that they had lots of training, more than they would need because most of it really wasn't relevant to where they lived in a rural area. So just that balance of how do we ascertain what's needed and what's be the most beneficial for our individual departments.
If I could comment to that. Yeah, so on the safety codes end of things, when you have, I do believe it's 88 different facilities that we've tallied to date that need to be inspected. When we have to go to Bazzano and we got to drive to Bazzano, we got to do the inspection, we try and do, 3 to 5 in a day and then come back. But with a community of Bazzano that would have 25, 30 facilities that need to be inspected, that's more than one trip. So the hours really calculate on travel. It takes about an hour to 2 hours, depending on what the inspection is that you have to do. A hospital takes a lot longer than just a little restaurant. The lodge definitely would take more time, and hotels and things like that. Fuel stations do take a lot of time to inspect. So when you average it all out, it works out to be roughly, on 88 inspections, 660 hours is what I calculated it out to be. So, and that's with travel, paperwork, and a lot of that we find aren't code compliant to start with, so secondary inspections need to be done. Now, we've tried to mitigate that to some degree by saying, okay, here's your deficiency list that you need to correct. When you have that deficiency corrected, please send us a photo showing that it's corrected, and then we can do it. But then that's still a second time of doing paperwork to say that a second inspection was completed through photos and they meet the compliance. So there's still more paperwork a second time around when that happens. And I'm going to say that happens 65 to 70% of the time. Even with the City of Brooks, after we were getting better at it, it was still, a lot of them were 2 inspections, not just 1.
Okay, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
If I could just make one more comment, I hear a lot about, minimum standard and things like that. The one thing that I have done is I've joined the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association Core Compliancy Group, and what we're doing is working on what does that mean, in particular for volunteer rural fire departments. What is the core compliance that we need to have for those firefighters? So we're really trying to find that balance on what they need for their certification. But more importantly, how often do we train to keep up on those certifications so that in the event that maybe something does go wrong, we know that we're code compliant because we maintain the training that we've been certified in. So that is one thing that I am working towards.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Okay, I think we've heard that there is an appetite to look at a number of different ways of delivering this service, whether it's FTE or contract services. So I think that if you're good with that, we'll move on. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that presentation.
Thank you, Council.
Okay. Let's take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at when the big hand is between the 5 and the 6, please. We are up to item number 5.2, Municipal Services, a paving plan and priorities review in multi-lot subdivisions.
Well, good morning.
Morning, Mark.
In typical fashion, here you go. Here's your paving plan, priorities. This year, I'd also like to introduce council to the potential of multi-lot subdivisions and gauge your interest on that, and whether there's any changes to your current paving plan or priorities. CAO Fensky already spoke to some of your funding and planning of your next project on the list. However, with that, there are times where we have multi-lot subdivisions that are a significant traffic generator. They're either a place where people live or a place where people work, being industrial, commercial, and those are some of our higher traffic areas that may warrant committee of the whole and council's future consideration of adding onto the paving plan. So brought it to you today to determine whether there's any changes to the current plan and priorities that my department needs to work on for the 2025 budget, as well as out the following 4 years and essentially the 10-year capital plan, if there's any changes out that far, as well as if there's any additional inclusions or deletions from the plan as committee would see fit, and if there's recommendation to move any of that forward to council for interim budget presentation. So as part of this package, we've updated the numbers for you with what that forecast looks like on the 20-year paving and paving plan overlay. We've added the paving priorities, which can always be found on the County of Newell website. And then with this, went through an exercise with our GIS analyst to pull out the subdivisions, the multi-lot subdivisions within the county, showing you what properties there are and summarizing some bullet points at the bottom of that as to what potential impact there could be for persons living in or working in and around subdivisions if there was any consideration warranted there. So if you've made your way through the package, I'll entertain any questions for clarification, and we'll see where discussion leads us today, I guess.
Thank you, Mark. Holly, go ahead, and then Ellen, please.
Couple of things. I'd like to know if we're getting significant complaints from any particular areas or ones that you think are hard. Second question would be, what would be the payback time? You said it takes longer to do grading than it would be, right? But how long, when you look at the grading cost as opposed to paving, how many years have we ever equalized that out? And the third thing would be, if we did this, would we even ever get around to paving anything, because everything would be overlay? If I look at the list already, we don't get to Tilly's, that highway went for a long time. It's a lot of distance already between paving. So those are my questions for you.
For sure. We've done some assessment. This year has been a little bit interesting for 2024 because it's rained so much throughout the springtime to truly get a cycle and cycle times on graders in multi-lot subdivisions. We are finding, though, I've got some of that highlighted, that anything from 1.5 times to 2 times that of grading a straight road, a grid road in the County of Newell, is what it takes for our grader operators to work in and around traffic, congested areas, and is primarily all the intersections that they have to deal with within some of the subdivisions, because those are a lot of movements to go around those radiuses and get things done. Along with that, I'll say the conservative number is about $2,000 per kilometer per year to maintain a road. Go to, let's say, dust abatement. Let's use that one as an intermediate kind of resolution, where you're going to have a dust-free surface that reduces grading, because we do that in the Westland Acres area and whatnot. You're looking at another $4.60 per lineal meter, so another $4,600 per kilometer. Or if you wanted to go to paving, you're probably looking at about 1.2 to 1.3 million per kilometer. So how many 2000s go into $1.2 million? How many 4600s go into $1.2 million? And that would kind of be where council could set some service levels and expectations at. As for the question regarding, are there any areas with significant customer service requests or complaints? I can't say that they're significant. We have people that phone in regularly where they're kind of representing an area rather than having 30 or 40 residents phoning us. One person will kind of do that or act on that behalf. Other times we have the individual phoning in off of their road, not necessarily tied to a multi-lot subdivision. We deal with things in our rotation. That's the level of service that council has set with the current level of service of grader operators and machinery and equipment. For the better part, I don't know, is council's goal to have 0 customer service requests coming in on gravel roads? I don't think that's the goal. I don't think it's realistic. It's a reach if you want to get there. Is it to be dust free? Is it to be paved? That's really where I'm looking for direction out of the 10 of you and where you want to see the community go in the future. So the original paving plan we've talked about numerous times, that came out of a 2001 study. We're still working for that. Connecting communities to communities, commodities to market, and people to destinations. So if there's anything that you would like to reprioritize or plan, that's great. And if there's any additions as well.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And just, I'm going to follow up, and then we've got a number of other questions, but just in terms of the multi-lot subdivisions, typically those residents would pay an extra amount, potentially if they decided to pave their streets or wanted that done. And just in terms of the process, have you had conversations with some of these subdivision communities and crunched numbers for them? And are there any that are pressing to move ahead, knowing the numbers?
The one that stands out the most is Westland Acres. They came to the County of Newell, I want to say in that 2011, 2012 period. Due to proximity to the city of Brooks, it was being discussed about getting a communal sewage system tied into the city of Brooks if and when the service capacity existed. That doesn't currently exist from the city. They haven't been able to accept it. This was also just prior to the rural water project, so potable water system as well being extended out to them. Those potable waters in place. I believe everybody in Westland Acres is registered and has access now. So that's taken off. Currently, everybody in there has their private sewage disposal system, being septic tank and field or pump out. So really those infrastructures have been alleviated. It would be coming down to a paved road. And if council elected to do that through the paving tax or what we've got in the paving reserves, if they want to move forward with imposing a local improvement tax or any other funding solution, there's a few options available there if that were to proceed.
Okay, thank you. I think I've got Greg and then Adina and Ellen.
Yeah, I've got a couple things. If I could talk to Westland Acres real quickly, I'd like to see what the thought is from the residences. Are the residences open for a local improvement tax being applied in order to get that area paved? Is that something they'd be open, or is it just we're going to be doing it as a regular paved road? I know it is a subdivision, a private subdivision. So, you know, should it be any more than anything else without them actually paying a little bit more for local improvement? I want to just kind of address the paving plan, and I do see the Highway 1A to Tilly paving plan, and I brought this up a couple times. I really do wrap my head around trying to justify that $7 million for that road, and the benefit that it would make to Tilly and to movement between Brooks and and Tilly. How I see it is that that road would be satisfying the south end of Brooks for the most part. And that would be people that are running from Tilly to the south end of Brooks for work and for school and for things like that. Anybody that is traveling from Tilly or out to the north end of Brooks, then that would be the main hub, Safeway, Canadian Tire, and Walmart areas. They would hop on highway number 1. So I would think the majority of people that would be using that pavement would be going to the north side or the overpass on the north side. I just question how much traffic. I know that Tilly is a growth hamlet, and I do appreciate that. They already have 2 paved ins and outs out of the community already. And I just question, yeah, you've got 2 paved ins and outs, south and north, out of the community already. And I'm just wondering how to add another one. Is it really worth the cost of doing that? How much of it would be commercial use? I don't know how much that road is used by the crude haulers and things like that. Are the crude haulers using Highway 1 out to the for their hauling purposes? Is 1A used a lot? Those are my questions. And is it worth the $7 million cost when we have other projects like truck routes and in and around Brooks? Is it? That's a question that I have.
Okay, thank you. Who's going to respond to that?
I just want to say I'm very disappointed that you always speak against this, Greg. There are 2 buses that take that road every day. There are several businesses that travel that road, and depending on where you live in Division 2 determines whether or not you take that road, whether you're going to the north side or the south side. I feel in the spirit of our strategic planning and Tilly being a growth hamlet, that paving this would be beneficial. I'd like to see it start sooner than what it's scheduled for. The other thing being, speaking to some of the councillors from the MD of Tabor and them talking about what happened with Grassy Lakes when they put in when the county developed the subdivision in the hamlet of Grassy Lakes, how it grew from being a hamlet of 300 and something to just about 1,000. I would really like to see that also happen for Tilly, being a growth hamlet, being 10 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on which road you take. From Brooks, when you said two paved roads, I question that because it's the 876, it goes through Tilly, but unless you're going to Rolling Hills or to church, you don't normally go south out of Tilly. But that's just what I have to say about paving the Highway 1A.
Okay, thank you. Ellen, I missed you before. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. I had the same question that you asked about the local improvement tax, but I like to ask, the paving priority chart, does it have Brooks to Kinbrook Island on there? Since we want to talk to the province about cost sharing that road?
Go ahead, Mark.
When I first started with Newell in 2008, there were identified paving projects on here that included 3-digit highways, 2-digit highways with the province of Alberta. They're not your jurisdiction to pave. So it was my recommendation probably 14 years ago to remove them from the paving plan and priorities. And if council wanted to have that as a lobbying effort, that could end up on their strategic priorities chart in that regard. And that way we weren't trying to account for something in our budget that wasn't really ours. Now, if that's still something that council wants to put in there and try to get into a partnership like we have on other 3-digit highways, then whatever the cost funding share is that you'd be looking for, we'd have to also throw in this paving priority list and plan and throw money at it as well. So, but right now the overlay is 100% Alberta Transportation's cost. So it's a matter of how council wants to look at working with that.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Lynette, did you? No? Holly, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of the things that Adina said about Tilly. I think we're looking at, if you look at Tilly, to get to Tilly, to go to the number one and all the way down to number one is extra miles. And I think we need to look at making our hamlets more accessible. I think Tilly could develop more in terms of business if we had a closer access to Brook. So I think economically, we do have potential there that I don't think we want to miss out on. It's Dutchess has a nice direct access, and they've really grown from that. I think we can see some of that. With Tilly, we're looking at doing housing. I think that actually makes sense. In terms of options, though, I would just like to stay with option 5, that we leave it as is, unless there's some reason specifically to pursue something. We have a lot of paving. We've got a lot of paving overlays, and we have to look at our capabilities to maintain pavement, and that's significant. So I would be going with option 5.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Neil?
Yeah, I always go for servicing more people, most bang for our buck. And I've got in my division, Westland Acres, and I've got the subdivision that I developed, which is 70 lots. I'm looking at it right now. That quarter used to pay $100 a year taxes. Probably pays 150, 200,000 now. And this is coming from a former councillor, but their priority wanted to do the Bow Slope Road and the road from Lake Newell Resort to Kinbrook. They didn't because the landowners were against it. I know that Dallas Martin is willing to talk about it, and Tim Thompson has since died. And I think those projects, for the relatively small amount of kilometers there, we probably service hundreds and hundreds of people. Where if we go to do the Tilly, I'd like to see a road count out there, but it wouldn't even be compared to these other ones.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Holly?
I don't think that was really a discussion today. I think it was just these multi-lot subdivisions. I don't know if we really want to entertain beating up again what road to pave next, since we're not doing it this year. Do you really want to go down that way? Or just kind of deal with the multi-lot subdivision question?
I think it's probably open, but we can deal with it at a committee of the whole as well again, right? Is that strategically a better, a more exhaustive opportunity maybe, eh? Matt and then Greg.
Yeah, I think today we're really looking at the level of effort that staff are going to put into the first numbers that you see on your draft interim budget. So if you're happy to see them the way they're shaking out in front of you here today, that's what you're going to see. If I insist, and we all support the idea of seeing Township Road 18.2 and Range Road 14.5 in there. What does that do to the numbers? That's what today's kind of about. And we can always, when we get to interim, have that exact same conversation. If you're looking, all right, let's roll these in at that point. The conversation about the multi-lot subdivision does fall out of requests from Westland Acres. I think we crunched the numbers. Maybe you shared it while I wasn't paying attention today. $60,000 per, is that where we shook out?
Yeah, I think that's about where it shakes until you tender something. You don't know exactly though, yes.
Yeah, so from administration's point of view, we kicked around the idea, does it make some sense if we get our graders out of those subdivisions, especially the ones that aren't dust abated, are there savings to the county, and would council entertain, whatever that proportionate savings looks like, being reinvested into a multi-lot subdivision in terms of paving? From administration, I'm not going to bring a plan that says you should pay for 100% of paving in Westland Acres, but maybe that looks like a 5% share based on what you get back in operational efficiencies for those graders getting back on the straightaway gravel road. So I think that's kind of the philosophy on the multi-lot subdivisions. We can always entertain local residents or local business owners petitioning for a local improvement there and paying for it all. Is there a philosophy where the county chips in a couple of percent towards that?
I guess, oh, somebody else have a comment? Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, pretty innocuous question. The ring road that we've been working towards, or that's what I know it as, where does it fall on our plan? What is it titled here?
Well, the north-south is towards the bottom of your plan there.
Okay.
The second from the bottom.
East Gem Road?
Where's the east-west, Matt?
It's so far out, we're not even talking about it.
That's what I was thinking.
Beyond,
Is that right?
it's beyond 20 years for the rate at which we're saving in the paving fund, you know, a couple $1 million a year, and the list of priorities, it's so far out. I'll pull it up here and get you an actual answer where it falls in the, mind you, that is 20 years. Our database only goes 20 years, so
Okay.
it's beyond.
I thought it was closer than that, all the investment that we've made out there, and it's that far out. Okay.
So, okay, thank you. Lynette.
Just a logistical question about the paving in those subdivisions. Where does the water go then when it runs off the road? Like, can we deal with that without there actually being any sewers or anything like that?
Yeah, when you're in the Westland Acres situation, they already have curb and gutter out there, so we'd be looking at rehabbing whatever needed to be rehabbed there. We have catch basins out there tied to pipe that runs to a open surface ditch discharge, and subdivisions such as Johnson Estates and stuff currently has open surface ditches, which is what you see down at Lake Newell Resort as well. That's where the water would shed to. That water is strictly coming off of the road. That's why those ditches are there. It's really not to be receiving the water of private properties and stuff, but we know watershed ends up there. So that's how drainage gets addressed.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kelly, a question?
Quick question. On the acreage maps, there are two colors in a Moto Acres subdivision, green and yellow. Tell me the difference in that.
Green is within the multi-lot subdivision. Yellow is not within any multi-lot subdivision. You can see how the multi-lot subdivision boundaries are drawn. So when you're looking at IMOTO 1, everything in green would be administration's recommendation to pave if council was going to look at that. If you were looking at paving IMOTO 2 before IMOTO 1, you need IMOTO 2. You need the yellow township road, and you should have a component of the green in IMOTO 1 paved at the same time. We would have to look at how we formulate that if council were to set a priority on any one of these multi-lot subdivisions.
And we don't treat the two colors differently as a maintenance situation?
No.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Okay, just to move us ahead here, I think I understood Matt's comment to be that basically, you know what the cost of that we're currently spending within these subdivisions on a kilometer by kilometer basis. And the question, I think, or the comment was, would we reinvest that into, you know, over a period of time into a paving plan if that's what the residents were requesting, recognizing that the balance then, or unless there would be a % or two that we might add to it, would be collected as a local improvement tax over a period of years, right? That's our current perspective on that. To me, that makes a lot of sense. That we would do that. We would invest what we currently spend on paving maintenance if it reduces us long term, and the balance would be collected through a local improvement tax, maybe less. A % or two, I'd be willing to look at that, but we don't have any clear demands on that at this point. So I think can we move ahead or move forward and not spend
Yeah, this is purely for council's consideration. If there's any direction of
Yeah.
administration to change plan, add the plan, delete
Yeah.
from the plan, or leave the plan as the same, and
And I think Neil commented on the road that runs past Westland Lakers out to past Bow Slope. And I think one of the details with that one is that also requires an arrangement with the city of Brooks, right? That isn't entirely our road or not?
no, the county of Newell has the 1 mile from the city of Brooks boundary north, and it's not even a full mile because we already paved down from Joanne Trucking Road past Bow Slope Shipping. So the county has half a mile or more or less remaining there. City of Brooks is entirely inside of that. If that was a conversation that you wanted to open up with the city for boundary roads, Range Road 15-0 and Range Road 14-5, those two roads would be something administration could assist council on if that was for further discussion.
To me, it seems that's a road that that would serve us well to be improved because it's a,
As I understand, it's not on the city's plans. So we'd be paving, it doesn't make sense because the whole road wouldn't get done. You just have a portion, I think, so.
which is what I was saying. The city wouldn't be interested in that. Is that what you're saying?
Past discussions, it was they don't have funding for it. They don't have it on their priorities.
Okay, Neil and then Greg.
I think that's an excellent road to do, though, and I can see the city being approachable on that if we were to step up and do ours. At least we get something done, and instead of sitting for years waiting for the big project, we can do a little bit of pavement here and there.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
The north-south truck route, would that actually pull, no, not the north-south, would that be east-west? I'm thinking, okay, east-west. Would that pull trucks out of Brooks, the truck route out of Brooks, if we were to do that one? Just wondering how that would affect things.
That was the goal when the engineering was conducted on that, was to get truck traffic away from that tight intersection in and around the railway crossing within the city of Brooks. It's also on an angle, so it's not the best for sight lines with truck traffic. Additionally, it was to get truck traffic off of Sutherland Drive coming in on that east interchange and getting them out of the skateboard park playground zone and away from Eastbrook Elementary and Sunrise School. So it's the four-way stop up there on 7th and Sutherland is congested. It's not easy for truck and movement. It's not great for hazardous substances to be transported through. It's not ideal, so that's where previous council came up with the east-west truck road alignment and the north-south to create a semi-ring road around the city of Brooks.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, and saying that, would it be beneficial to, and what is industry saying in respect to that truck route? And also, is it prudent to be moving that up?
Honestly, I don't hear anything from anybody about any of it. We don't have all the land acquisition done because it was put as a priority to put it on the plan and acquire land as land became available. So my knowledge of that, as land comes for sale, it's to try to engage in people beforehand. It was one of the very first things that this council got dealt with when you got elected to your term. I walked in and asked for a complete buyout of land that was coming for sale that hadn't hit the market yet, thankfully. So we're chipping away at it as time permits, and whenever council firmly puts a priority on it, administration will take that direction and escalate matters.
Okay, thanks. Mark, you got a follow-up, Greg?
Just to follow up, how much is left for land acquisition for that one, east-west?
East-west, I believe there's 5 parcels that need to be acquired yet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, to move us along, I think we've got good information in front of us to consider, and we'll look at it again in further budget discussions. So you've got what you need from us for now?
Nothing's changed until interim budget presentation comes.
That's right. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, next one, community entrance exit signs. Put together a package for you highlighting the current condition of our community entrance signs. They are weathered, they are dated, originally from about the 2004 period. A lot of communities went through this process, and since then, a lot of them have started to update. Threw some signs in there from some of those that have updated, that include Wheatland County, Rocky View County. You've got special areas that I believe they look like they've got much newer signs than what they had previously, and wanting to engage council to determine what the direction is. Are we to look at what we currently have, refurbish them so they are maintained just as we would a paved road by doing an overlay, get everything refinished on these signs? Or is council of the opinion that we should be moving forward with something new? Or let them sit as they are? Looking for some direction. And further to that, threw in there all community entrance signs, expanding perhaps to include thank you for visiting signs or exit signs, and also some of the smaller perimeter signs there as well that exist. So open to thoughts of council, and perhaps it even goes down the rabbit hole of what do you do with your hamlet entrance signs, because community entrance is all community entrance.
Okay, thank you. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to be excused. I've got a funeral to go to.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Have a good day, guys.
Yeah. Holly.
When I looked at the Wheatland proposal, those signs were very expensive, but is that what prices of signs are in the ballpark of? Because that's a lot of money.
As per my RFC, you're looking from $40,000 to $100,000, and that's after discussions with Wheatland County, and the MD of Tabor is currently on hold due to pricing shock.
Okay, thank you. I think the opportunity or the responsibility to identify our jurisdiction is important. I don't want us to break the bank doing it, but I have traveled significant miles across the province in various directions in the last year or so, through the course of the last year, and that is one. It's by signage that you know when you go from one county to the other. So that is one of the ways for us to distinguish ourselves. So I think it's important that we look at that. I'm not exactly sure which of these options we look at, but I think we should look at some annual maintenance to, a plan to get ourselves back up to speed on identifying, within a reasonable budget item. Who else had comments here? Ellen, please. And Lynette first. Go ahead.
I would like to see them refurbished. I think totally replacing them now with the way, like seeing the Wheatland County ones, to me, they look very trendy. And in about 7 to 10 years, you're going to know that they're dated. So I like the fact that ours are wooden, and which is a very timeless thing. So I would love to just see what refurbish, like take the number 4 off and see what that would cost us. That's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
I am in agreement. Refurbish. The Wheatland. Yeah, they're flashy and state of the art. But yeah, in 8 to 10 years, they're going to be not so flashy and not so state of the art anymore because things change. So I'm with Lynette on the refurbish side.
Okay, thanks. Ellen, you're okay. Anyone else on this? Matt and then Holly, please.
Can we deal with the Brooks Bandits sign at the same time that we're talking about the welcome sign? So we have an open council resolution saying we're going to, put County of Newell, home of the bandits. The city beat us to that. I would like to resolve that question of if we're going to refurbish, are we also going to refurbish and get the bandits sign listed underneath? Or do we just say, it's the County of Newell, it was a good idea, it had its time, bandits have their recognition on the city signs, we'll let them have it, and all that we'll have on our welcome sign will be County of Newell, not Get Newell Connect, not fire ban, not anything, or Canadian Badlands. Thank you, Mark. There's maybe some efficiencies that we can see operationally, but by not having it littered, and litter's not the right, posted with additional advertising.
Well, and I think maybe not the same sign everywhere either, right? Like Highway 136, so we've got a couple of major highways, or one in particular, and then another one that's close. It might be different there than it would be, through all of this. So I think a variety, or not a one-size-fits-all necessarily, for sure. But I think I had Holly and then Dan.
I was going to say, I've traveled to Wheatland County quite recently, and I didn't even notice they had new signs. So I'm like, really? That's what it looked like? I didn't even notice. So, how much you spend on signs is important to say where you're at, but rebranding and lots of money doesn't necessarily help some of us.
Yeah. Thanks, Holly. Dan, please.
I've been thinking for a while we need to do something with our signs because they do look old and tattered. Whether it's just refurbishing or coming up with a whole new idea, I don't know what the answer is, but I do want to see something done with those signs. And then the other one question is, all this big expense, is that in design or is that in construction of these signs where all the expense is coming from?
Those expenses are coming from both. Wheatland County went about things a little bit different. Tabor's going through things different than Wheatland did. And for council's information, please understand Wheatland County did an entire rebranding. When the county did the rebranding, we changed the logo. We removed the number 4. That's all we did. We didn't go through this big document. We didn't talk about all of our signage. We didn't change our letterhead over immediately. We didn't change all that over. It happened with time. Wheatland County has taken the total expense of everything into their account and said from single-digit to double-digit highways and 3-digit highways, like they have a 3-phased approach just with signage, and they did a rebranding for obviously economic and tourism purposes on top of it. So that's how they chose to go. I threw it in there as an example. I'm thankful that they shared it with us because I think it sheds a lot of light to council on where you can go with it. Appreciating with what you're talking about today, that if it's refurbishment, we will get them refurbished. If we're told that wood is too far gone, we will get some estimates done on that to replace the sign and have same go up. So it's really the 4 locations that you're talking about that the wood signs are on Highway 1, Highway 36. After that, they're basically a 12-inch by 12-inch County of Newell sign at the other boundaries, and we will continue to maintain those and replace them as time permits, if that's direction from.
Okay, Ellen, please.
When you say refurbishing, would that also change the color? I think it is so dated, that dark brown. Would that necessarily be dark brown again? Or would that change a lighter color? Make it a little bit more modern, if you will?
I would have to talk to a woodworker to find out what's possible with what was done originally with the cedar and whether it can be a lighter color or not. If it's to be lighter, then maybe there's something they can apply to it to lighten it. I know there was discussion previously as well between Matt and myself about at least getting the County of Newell to light up or reflect in headlights and stuff. You don't see that on too many of the community entrance signs, but some of that information is part of this package of where council originally went down the road as well. Through new signs, people are doing that through the illumination standards of the stickers and stuff that go on things. So we can look at different options and bring that to council for interim budget approval.
Sure. I think that's reasonable. I see nods. Appreciate that, Mark. Okay, thank you. Greg, quick, please.
That entrance sign into Lake Newell Resort, was that paid for by the Hamlet Society or Hamlet, or is it paid for by the flagpoles? Is that a county thing or is that a Hamlet thing?
Lake Newell Resort has 2 signs. One sign was erected by the current largest landowner at the resort, which is now Lake Newell Land Company, formerly K300. That is the big stucco sign up in the northeast corner of the hamlet boundary as you approach on Township Road 18-2. The community was a little bit offended by that because it says Lake Newell Resort.ca, which is a website. That's where community members didn't appreciate that because that community is not solely based on that developer. So the community erected that sign at the corner of Township Road 18-2 and the Lake Newell Resort Road L intersection anyway. That's where that sign and those flagpoles come from. So we have competing things, and I don't believe that the .ca was on the sign when it was originally proposed to the county to be erected by the developer, but it's definitely there. And then you also see that that sign's not maintained because the Pelican logo and stuff has fallen off of it, and there it sits on the ground next to it. So.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Let's move on. The next one is the Rolling Hills truck parking lot, and I think that's a pretty basic decision there. I think we're interested in, go ahead.
I'm interested in hearing where you would like to go with this. Councillor Short has been part of the advisory meetings where this has come up, so surfacing this from the Hamlet Advisory. Previous years, we built a truck parking lot. The goal was to keep persons working in industry, living in the community, giving them a spot to park their truck. Prior to that, they had been parking a few miles south on Highway 875, leaving their truck and trailer with whatever load was being carried, really not visible to anybody other than passersby on the highway. So this was the pilot project for getting a truck parking lot built. We built it. We left it unsigned because we thought that the word of mouth through the community would suffice. From the Hamlet Advisory Committee, if I understand correctly, Councillor Short, they're saying that it's not enough because people are asking, well, what is it? Can we actually use it or not? But we are finding truck traffic being parked in it and parked in it for a few days on end. So less rules work. Put a sign up indicating it. Perhaps it attracts a lot more traffic and it becomes a traffic jam. I don't know. And so my suggestions in there for council's consideration of whether you put a truck parking sign up, whether it's one at the west end of the truck parking lot that is parallel to the highway, or if you want to consider signs leading up to the truck parking sign along Highway 875, then I have to go through Alberta Transportation's permitting process to get those signs erected, if they'll even approve them. Numerous options and looking for council's direction on that.
I like option one. I don't know what the rest of you, but that's the basic one, right? A single sign. The people who need it would soon know what it's about and how much information do the rest of the people need. Go ahead.
I'm curious what the people in Rolling Hills thought that they needed exactly.
Dan, have you got an answer to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, they just want a sign that says that it's a truck parking lot.
You like option one, Dan? Is that what you're saying? Okay, that's
they're actually getting kind of irritated that there hasn't been a sign placed on after numerous requests. So they just want a simple truck parking lot sign.
Okay, option one, is that what you're suggesting? Okay, anybody else want a different option there? I think we're good with that. Is that good?
I'm good.
That's what you need? Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 5.3, information and technology, advertising strategy and budget proposal. Pardon me? Oh.
Sucker for the struggle.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, Roberta.
So we have a couple items. The first is about an advertising strategy, and I'm going to ask Catherine to kind of bring forward her perspective, and then I'll offer a few words, and then we'll go from there. Catherine?
Okay. So now that I've been here for just over a year, I have a really good idea, I think, about how this organization uses its external communications. And I started to notice late last year how many ads we were submitting to the bulletin, and then just sort of tracking the bulletin to see where they are in the paper. Notice that our ads are scattered. Sometimes we have upwards of 8 ads in a paper, and they're all over the place. And so, you know, some people might be seeing some of our stuff and not getting to the end of the paper. And so my argument would be, if we're spending the money to post in the bulletin, could we spend maybe a little bit more and have a dedicated page every single week just to the county?
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
So I think it's quite an innovative idea. We kind of took a look what's been our general budget. On average for advertising, it's close to $40,000 annually. There's been a couple of times when we have something special going on that budget jumps. For example, election. I noticed the budget for next year with an election coming up has jumped to almost $60,000 or just over that. I thought this was a good idea, not only this, but in relation to other things that we are attempting to do to build kind of this overall strategy for us to reach the public. There's a couple of things. At first, we kind of thought, okay, is it advertising? Like, do we do a lot at the beginning of the year where we hire, do a hiring scale? I was quite surprised to see that it's pretty even across the year, so that would make sense. It would support this strategy. There's another aspect to it is that when a lot of our communication we do through social media or our website. And we've talked about this, I think, with council and internally. Who do we reach when we send it on social media? Who are we missing when it's on social media and it's on the website? We've stuck with newspaper legislation or the fact that reaches another group in our population that we want to make sure that we communicate with. What happens is we've got this disparity then. A lot of the things that we're communicating out through social media is not in the newspaper. So we might be, there might be a gap in our communication. Doing this way allows us to capture those communications and put them in the paper. It'd be in a consistent location. There was concerns about, well, now do we have to worry about coming up with content? The strategy using our posts that we've already created simplifies that. We've already got them. We need space. We just can fill those in with those posts. So using the Brooks Bulletin, there's kind of a trade-off. We thought, okay, we also have Stingray. We wish to continue with Stingray. We think it's beneficial. We're getting more mature in the things that we're putting on to Stingray. We've got more consistency. I think there's still room for us to grow that out. Bazzano Publishers, we debated that a way to help to reduce the cost of moving with the strategy forward is to maybe recognize that Bazzano Publishers already covers a demographic that's covered with the Brooks Bulletin, and maybe we can help to keep the cost lower by maybe discontinuing going with that group. We also are looking at the Brooks Bandits Jumbotron. Again, this gives us a different type of advertising, a different group that we can be reaching out to, and we would like to incorporate that. So keeping that all in mind, we just kind of want to know what council's looking at. I'll read some of this. I don't know if you've read it all, but consistent communication, that's one of our key for this strategy. That includes the opportunity to develop proactive communications and campaigns. It's not just about a one-time thing. We want to look at, okay, we want to promote this. Where are we going to put it? All the different medias in which we can advertise and have a campaign drawn out. It's a little more of a mature, and it's where we wanted to go with a communications officer. We want to reach as many of our county citizens as we can, and we want to ensure I'm going to just read it because I'm going to mess it up. So consistent communication that includes the opportunity to develop proactive communications and campaigns that reach all the county's citizens is the understood outcome of the county's communication program. The county recognizes that its citizens vary in their methods of communication, and this proposal is designed to offer equal opportunity for information regardless of that preferred method. So more or less, we want to know from council, do you support the idea? We can get some hard numbers, bring it back during the budget process. Is this aligned with what council is hoping to get from communications and a direction that you want to go in? And would you like us to bring it back through the budget process?
Okay, thanks. Oh, go ahead. Holly?
Just a little bit of clarification. You're saying it will be more costly. So before we go ahead and say yes, I mean, approximately what kind of increased budget are we talking?
The estimate that I kind of put together is it would be above, like I said, currently average 39,000, close to 40,000. When we have these special things, it's a little over 60. I think it's going to fall right in between that, between 50 and 55,000 a year.
I think that's a good idea. I'd like to see the numbers. We're not deciding to do this today. We're looking for more information, and I think it is very consistent with what we've talked about in terms of communication. I think it also offers us the opportunity to, on a weekly basis, put forward an issue like economic development. Like, what do we see as bringing results for the region? Through, like, what are the initiatives that would increase economic activity in our region? We could deal with that over a period of weeks or months, and probably even generate response from readership, even in something like the Brooks Bulletin, if our communication is dynamic enough to spur people's thinking, let's say. So I think I'd like to see it, unless someone's saying they don't want to. I think we should go ahead to take a look at this. Dan, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm all right with spending a little bit more money on this for sure. And to your point, Catherine, about all the ads all over the newspaper, when you flip through the paper, you do get kind of tired of seeing it, and you stop reading it. If it was all on one page, you'd stop and you'd look at it all. And a lot of times when we do stuff, we get the same thing. Well, you never said what we were doing. No one told us. Well, having a page dedicated would be a really good way of doing that. So I think it'd be great to see the numbers on this.
Right. I'd agree with you, Dan. Thank you. So is that good enough information to go forward?
Very helpful.
Kelly, go ahead.
You had to know that I had to say something about dropping a newspaper, right? Granted, the present publisher is maybe doing a transition thing. I would like us to be open to another business that is going to, or is proposed to serve the west side, and not close the door. There is talk of something being created over there, so just be open to something new coming from the west side.
Yep, no, for sure. And we can also, propose it with some advertising there too. That's why we're there. And that can be a danger that we're overlooking the benefits of using that publisher that maybe we're just not aware of right now. So totally understandable.
I think that's well placed.
Good. Second one, sorry. For years, and we have used Laserfiche as our electronic document and records management system. Ariana's got my name on her name with me here. I don't know if she wants to go first, but I'm going to go first, and she's our records management expertise, so she can fill in anything that I've neglected to say. We've used Laserfiche now for electronic document and records management system since 2004. We didn't use it as we could have used for many years, and then we've started to use it in about 2014, and it has been transformative. I would say I am a huge fan of Laserfiche. I think it's made huge difference to staff and to our residents and the people we serve in our efficiencies and reduce the cost of many of the things that we do. Since we've had Laserfish, we have also purchased Office 365, subscription-based. It never used to be at first. You bought it, you installed it on every machine. Now it's subscription-based. Office 365 has SharePoint, and SharePoint has the ability to work as an electronic document and records management system. In 2024, Laserfish, which we pay an annual, is called an LSAP, so we pay a support fee for it annually. 2024, our budget is $68,085. We would expect, like all things, it's going to increase by at least 2%, but we know inflation is not 2% on an annual basis. We've looked into SharePoint. It's come up a few times over the past few years. Is it possible to use SharePoint? We've heard of other people who use SharePoint for electronic document and records management system, and we have heard negative things about it, and we've heard positive things about it. There's a company when I was in that kind of had presented a pitch, and so we've taken a look at it, and I asked them for a budgetary quote. And we're going to take a closer peek, depending on what council says here today. They have said that they can create for us the environment of an electronic document and records management system with SharePoint at a cost between $135,000 and $175,000. It would be a one-time cost. Since 2004, when we've had Laserfish, the county has been able to move 500,000 records, over 500,000 records into Laserfish. Records management is a key requirement of the MGA. Today, we still have 4 million records that we have to deal with. And the number of records we deal with on a daily basis goes up all the time. In 2023, before we moved to Office 365, the size of our emails was 246 gigabytes. Since then, it has tripled in size, meaning now each staff member has 3 times as many documents that they have to manage just in their emails. So there's lots of things in an effort to try to help staff manage with the records management and meet our records management obligations. In 2024, Council agreed for us to bring in Shiny Docs. Shiny Docs is a way where we can search all of our repositories at one time. We've just finished that implementation and we're starting to realize the benefits of that. One of its shortcomings is it does not integrate with Laserfish. So we don't see the documents in Laserfish from Shiny Docs, and it cannot do any of its automation with Laserfish. It does integrate with SharePoint. So if our document managements were in SharePoint, we could use Shiny Docs to assist with managing those documents. There's also many impacts. I've listed as many as that I could think of. There's training requirements, of course, reducing the number of systems that we manage and look after also has benefits. But there are also drawbacks. One of the reasons why we love Laserfish is for its automation, that it provides us with forms and with workflow. They've had significant impact on the way we work. One of the concerns I think we would have as an organization is, yeah, we could move to SharePoint and we would have gains in a lot of areas, but we could have a lot of losses. There could be a lot of gaps in, we would no longer be able to use those forms and that automation. If we did move to SharePoint, they may have features in SharePoint that could address those gaps, but we would have to redo the work that we've done in Laserfish to get it into SharePoint. This is something we may have to deal with at some point because, like many other systems, Laserfish wants everybody to start moving to a cloud or a hosted system. Currently, for us to move to the hosted system would mean that we would have to rebuild our forms and our workflows. So if we were to move today, we'd have to do that anyway. So I kind of put some information. I like numbers, and if you kind of look, we'd have a return on investment very quickly by making this change. I think there's some questions that need to be answered, and I think strategically we want to have answers to those before we would move ahead. And I think the question to council today, I'll just state what that might be and then ask Ariana to fill in anything she thinks I might have overlooked commenting about, is that we have a couple of options. If council supports us looking at this, we can spend service capacity exploring and answering those strategic questions. We can at that point either, if council approved the budget, we could put it in and have it approved in the budget process so that if we determine after 3 months or after 6 months that it's a go and we can move forward in 2025 and thereby realize the benefits earlier. The other option is we can, if council approves this as a valuable input for our time, we could spend the time exploring those questions, and once we've answered them, then come to council and ask for budgetary considerations. Ariana, did I miss some?
No, I think you explained that really well. And like you said, with everything's moving to the cloud, so it's almost inevitable that we'll have to redo the work anyway. So if we have to redo the work, why don't we redo it in something and save money at the same time?
I think that's almost goes without saying, doesn't it? So I think, which is option one, right? Bring it forward. I think we're good with that, aren't we? Greg?
I just have a question. As far as I know, being in the insurance business, we've had significant changes in our agency management systems over various years that I was in the business. And there is significant training sometimes when you do adapt from one system to another for staff. And have we worked in how much money is it going to cost in training and things like that with this system change?
I haven't calculated that out, but I 100% agree with that. We've had a lot of change at this organization. Every time you introduce a new system, there's more change. That is, so this is the way that I've been kind of looking at it, is right now we have Office 365. When we purchase for somebody and we have a question about anything in Office 365, even these big corporations that we use, they all have a Microsoft specialist to answer the question. At the County of Newell, we don't have a Microsoft specialist. We already have a training gap that we're trying to fill, right? And it has to be filled because we use Office 365. At the same time as we're trying to fill that training gap, we also then have Laserfish that is always changing, and we have to learn that as well. In a sense, the way I look at it, the more we can use our existing systems to achieve what we need to achieve as much as possible, that in the end that reduces the training requirements and knowledge of staff that we need. There's all kinds of specialized systems. You can get a system that'll just do this, and one that'll just do this, and one that'll just do this. But the more we can have, a core set of systems that provide that functionality, the better it is for us as an organization. I've said I love Laserfish. I'm a huge fan of Laserfish, and I'm invested in Laserfish, but I also understand it makes more sense monetarily to use a system that we're going to use for other things, as long as we can deliver on the functionality. And I also recognize by doing that, we reduce the training requirements of staff. They may initially have a bigger learning curve, but it would now reduce the number of systems they actually have to learn.
Okay, I think Holly?
2 questions. Sorry, 2 questions. One is, are you seeing training fatigue from staff with the constant change that goes on with this? And secondly, when you're saying you have to answer questions, I'm assuming that is just something you're doing in-house with more research. It's not, is that what you mean about answering the questions?
I don't remember I said that, but I'm sure I did. I just don't remember where it was. Yeah, I think we all feel fatigue. I don't mind change so much, and even I get fatigued. It is nice to have, you have change, but you kind of want a little bit of little downtime in between those changes. And I think as an organization, we are trying to really work at consolidating our training and focusing it in as many, but even replacement. So this was feedback from my own staff is when we replace servers, which is going to be coming up because it's end of life, the feedback from my staff is you can go and explore all the different options, and there's the newest and greatest and different systems and technologies that are coming in, but every time you do that, you're starting at ground zero, and you have to relearn a whole system. And those systems can be very complicated. What we would prefer, let's keep what we have, the technology, but get the upgraded one. Then it minimizes the amount of training that we have to do. There is training fatigue. I think fair to say that. But we have strategies. It's not like we're just saying, oh, we're tired. We're working towards a solution to that.
Okay, thanks, Roberta. Dan, you've got a question, comment?
Question. I seem to remember there was, when we invested in the shiny docks, I think there was a budget implication on that one. I guess my question is, if we did not go this route and just stuck with Laserfish, being that shiny docks does not work with Laserfish, would that be money wasted and wasted as well, or not?
No, fair question. Good question, actually. We can still, they have offered and are willing to integrate with Laserfish. It might be a fee, there might not be a fee. That's still under negotiation. But what Shiny Docs does for us is beyond what Laserfish does. I said there's 4 million documents. There's 4 million documents. They're on SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, network drives, email, Exchange. So there's 4 million documents. And when I have to try to move those into Laserfish. Records management really means you know what your records are, you know where they are, and you can find them when you need them. That's what Shiny Docs does for us. It gives us visibility into what we have on areas that we've never had visibility before. On our network drives, I wouldn't know what somebody else put on their network drive because I don't have visibility into that. But as a person, as I'm sure Matt would like visibility, he's ultimately responsible for records management. So he can go in now and he can search across all network drives, across SharePoint, across OneDrive, across Exchange, and find those. It also has AI features that goes in and identifies anything that's personally identifying information, and it brings it to the surface. It also tells us our duplicates and where they are so we can manage those. There's visualizations that we can use, and we actually have identified almost 20% of the 4 million documents, which equates to over 800,000 documents. Our Shiny Docs has identified for us that it will dispose for us. We've got it all scheduled out. We've got the training all done. We have not yet run the scripts, but they're ready to go. Right, Ariana? So we're pretty excited about that. It actually is filling a gap. And whether we use SharePoint or whether we use Laserfish, the benefits of Shiny Docs will still be there.
Seems to me we need to look at it because that's what brings value to our data, right? Otherwise, yeah. Okay, are we good to go ahead? Thanks, Roberta. Appreciate that. Okay, we're down to item number 6, council initiatives, and I have, two things there. We have talked a little bit about, well, more than a little bit. CDC South is certainly something that's in front of us. I did have a brief discussion with Matt about how we should, what do we need to, are there considerations for our upcoming budget that we need to look at as a result of that? What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
I think that'll be a big to be determined. We've got a few conversations to have with the province on what their resources coming to CDC is. I think there's been some conversations around committee and especially not just with committee, but even from the provincial side of things, you know, what opportunities are there for tourism out there? So there's probably a conversation with Brooks Tourism somewhere along the line. The buildings alone are $110 million asset that are sitting largely idle. You got a half dozen provincial staff out there. So I think, you know, whether Mitch or Lisa are thinking economic development initiatives that could potentially happen there. You could spend all kinds of money at CDC South if you wanted to. I think our aim has been trying to secure the provincial resources, and then if there are some economic development initiatives that council thinks of or people have ideas, you could put a pin in it anyways.
Yeah.
There was I mentioned the Regional Enhancement Reserve this morning for regional benefit, if there's a case to be made for spending some of those dollars towards CDC South. I've been trying my hardest to convince the province that they're already spending money out there and they just need to give that money to us to make more of, and we're making progress.
Yeah, good. Anything from the perspective of residential activity we need to look at there? It seems to me, even with some of the PEP discussions, that if there's some funding out there, maybe we need to, and maybe it's not funding we need as much as just to be aware of it. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we've spitballed the idea of the Tilley West End subdivision. Are there dollars from Canadian Infrastructure Bank to help facilitate that kind of project? The latest update I have from Barb at PEP last week is she's waiting to hear back on details from the CIBs. So as soon as she has those, she'll let me know. We've talked internally about, you know, what would it cost to just do the engineering on that. We typically don't have a lot of shelf-ready projects, so maybe that's a conversation we have at interim budget. Do you spend the $70,000 on engineering to get that ready to go? I think MD of Tabor has had some success in Enchant and Grassy Lake. They have a different market altogether compared to Tilley. A lot easier if there's Canadian Infrastructure Bank dollars to support it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Any other questions or comments? I think we're getting close to Greg, please.
I want just a question. I don't know if this is the right place for it or not. With the acquisition of the land from the EID for the Lake Newell Resort Pathway, is there any opportunity for commercial development or development in that on those? Is there? I know we acquisitioned 40 acres or something like that. Is there any opportunity to maybe develop and allow some commercial type of, like a store or something like that within that land?
Scream shop. Go ahead.
That would be an engineering question. I mean, when you look at some of the land that is on the outside edge of the pathway, it looks like you could squeeze some things in there, but you'd, again, need to spend some engineering dollars and engage with the community out there. I think our experience has been there's very particular demands and tolerances for what folks want to see going in there. So first place I'd start is probably with the community before we spend too many engineering dollars there.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think we're ready to adjourn and then shift over to our Committee of the Whole meeting. Please.
I'll move adjournment.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you for your attention and information presented this morning. Our meeting is adjourned.